Malaysia is seen as a role model and a leader in Islamic finance.
I think the most interesting thing that we see in AWS, a trend where Malaysia seems to have become, I would say, the center of innovation for ASEAN as a bloc.
But when we talk about cementing Malaysia's position in the digital space, in Islamic banking, I think there's a lot more that can be done.
2 Malaysian banks actually said, we want to build the first digital Islamic bank in Philippines.
I want to change the branding of Islamic finance away from the religion concept of it. I want those principles to be also in the mainstream banking.
So yeah, I think it's no secret to everyone in the room that Malaysia is a leader in Islamic bank. And we have a real opportunity to be able to capture and cement leadership in Islamic digital banking, which is an industry that's worth trillions of dollars, right? I'm very glad today to be joined by, of course, Kelvin, the CEO of Audax, Teruni, who's heading FSI in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines. I have to remember because you keep adding a country every time I see you. Then we're joined by Rafiza, who of course recently just got the green light to launch KAF Bank. So congratulations on that. And of course we have Farilla joining us on the panel as well. I think it's a very interesting panel because we have 2 tech experts, and we also have the oldest and the newest, the youngest. Oldest bank, not the oldest person. The oldest digital bank, the oldest Islamic bank, and also the newest Islamic bank. So I think we're going to get a kind of diverse views from all of the speakers today. So out of respect of the most established Islamic bank, so maybe you'll start first. Maybe you can give us a sense of what your thoughts are on the current state of digital Islamic banking in Malaysia and in beyond.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Vincent. Always a pleasure to be in your panel, and I see friends here. This is intimate. Okay, the state of the digital Islamic banks in Malaysia, I think it's really interesting. And because competition has been introduced. Aeon Bank has already gone live. Aeon Bank has acquired customers, and now KAF. So it's vibrant, it's robust, and competition, I always believe, catalyzes innovation. Beyond, I think, with respect to not just the digital banks, right, but there are also fintechs that have come up, not just in Malaysia, but in other regions, other countries, in other markets. And you can see that some of these fintechs became established because they want to solve specific problem statements, right? And so I think the purpose around Bank Negara introducing the digital banking framework is also anchored on financial inclusion. So I think what we can expect is really exciting times.
And I find it so fascinating, right? Because if you look at the incumbent banks in Malaysia, the only ones who spin off their own digital banks are both Islamic banks. It's you guys and Al Raji. So it's an interesting trend over there.
Okay.
Rafiza, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thanks Vincent and Fintech News for having me here. So what's in for KAF? Again, for us, like I said, at the end of the day, a bank is a bank. You know, why do people go to a bank or utilize a banking services? It's just to do very basic, keep your money, transfer money, make sure that your money is secure, So to me, I think we should focus on that really, really core services first and do it better, do it best. And that's it, because I know some digital banks say they are a tech company, which is a bank. For me, I sort of disagree. I say we're still a bank. But we are tech enabled, and at the end of the day, we're here to service our customers, so that our customers are happy with our services. So, with regards to product, it's again, I think you guys can sort of guess. We have our consortium partners, so you can sort of guess, what are the areas that we will go into. So it will be, so I think from there you can sort of know that
You can piece it together, right?
yeah, it's quite easy. So yeah.
I like how you were giving away the answer without giving away the answer. So that's a very subtle way of doing it. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. So maybe from Taruni and Kelvin, you guys can share more from a tech angle. What do you think about the current landscape, whether the digital maturity is there for Islamic banks in Malaysia and the region as well?
So Vincent, I think a lot of your question is answered if you just look at the panel. You've got heritage, you've got challenger, you've got tech, all sitting at the same table, and we have a journalist. So we're clearly doing something that's catching the news. I think the most interesting thing that we see in AWS with the country is that innovation is coming not just for the country. So we're also seeing a trend where Malaysia seems to have become, I would say, the center of innovation for ASEAN as a bloc. And there's a lot of tailwinds that are coming in. You've got Nexus, you've got open banking. So forces that are kind of looking at, can we do something born in Malaysia that is applicable to an Indonesian market or in the Islamic finance space, go westward into the Middle East. We're obviously very privileged with our region coming in last year to kind of, assist, support, help our customers as they go on the innovation path with partners such as Kelvin sitting here as well. And I won't steal his thunder about what he wants to share. But digital readiness, 100% yes, because that's what customers are asking for. We know there is a generational shift in what customer profiles banks will have, and the way banking has to reform to adapt to those growing changes is answered by going the digital path. And I think it's not going to be limited to the country, it's going to be ASEAN.
To me, one of the clear signs of the tailwind is the fact that both AWS and Audax is in the room today, right? And you guys are very much focusing on the Malaysian market. And of course, AWS has also invested billions into Malaysia as well. Kelvin, your thoughts?
Okay, Audax first went to market, say, 18, 24 months ago. We never had the intention of being specifically Islamic finance targeted, right? We were a technical platform. We could do digital transformation for pretty much any bank. Somewhat inadvertently, we ended up having a whole host of digital Islamic banking clients. And we've been to quite a few places around Southeast Asia and the Middle East. So I have 4 observations I really want to make on the basis of the last 2 years of having conversations with many clients, including the ones in the Middle East. One is that Malaysia is seen as a role model and a leader in Islamic finance. I mean, Malaysia has 12% of the market share, pretty much, of all Islamic finance globally. Last year, it ended at $260 billion of assets, right? And then it's growing at an average CAGR of 10 to 12%. For sure, all, including some of my clients in the Middle East, are looking at Malaysia and Malaysian banks specifically as significant players and hopefully leaders in terms of the way of thinking through Islamic finance. The second point I want to make is that while there has been a lot of advancement in the region with regards to the design of products and the way people access those products, it is still a drop in a massive ocean at this point. Not only that, the skill set gap is still quite evident in terms of how many people working in Islamic finance in the banks, digital or otherwise, have the ability to understand the requirements of actually building an advanced technical platform to be able to do all the fun things that we want to do from a business model standpoint. So about 20 to 30% have that. So there's still a big gap there to reskill and uplift staff, I think. The third observation I want to make is that I've also learned that from a technology standpoint, and to your point, Rafiza, is this: there really is no. I think I would go out on a limb and say there really is no massive difference between a conventional bank technology stack and a Islamic bank technology stack. Fundamentally, the difference lies in obviously nomenclature, T's and C's, the way we think about the product set, the design, the underlying way we generate the profit rates, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, people should and are starting to understand that a digital banking stack, regardless of the end product, has 6 or 7 components, high level, and has many subcomponents, all of which are pretty universal across the two. How you use it becomes a lot more important. And entity or the player with the right skill set to engineer the ability of that particular bank or finance company to be innovative will then change the space, in my mind. So those are my 3 observations.
All right, thank you for those observations. My next question was to ask whether or not the Malaysian banks are doing enough to cement our leadership, but it sounds more or less like a resounding yes. So I guess my tweak of that question is whether or not we are pushing that agenda strong enough, because I feel like when we look at the Islamic banking scene in Malaysia, there's a dichotomy, right? There is banks who are digital ready, banks who are more digitally matured, but there's also banks where they lean on the conventional side for their technology and the digital transformation, right? So overall, do you think that there is more to be done? Do you think they should also be more involved in all these digital transformation projects instead of just leaning on some of their conventional the conventional side of the bank?
So I'll attempt that. I think we have to understand how the banking groups in Malaysia are structured, right? Because it is somewhat a Conway's law, whereby how you're structured is how you face the market. And I am not in a position to comment on whether these groups have a leverage model or a shared services model, right? And so what the conventional side does, I believe, is not to the exclusion of the Islamic banking side. So it reflects how banking groups in Malaysia are structured. But I would actually like to comment on whether Malaysian banks are doing enough, right? I think domestically, yes, we are proactively responding to the disruption. But when we talk about cementing Malaysia's position in the digital space, in Islamic banking, I think there's a lot more that can be done. Yeah, and I say this because if you look at the successful digital banks in the world, of course, when we talk about Nubank, there is the population and there's the masses there. We talk about Starling. There is a regulator that's driving competition. Time Bank also, there was a problem statement of inclusion, right? But if you look at what make them successful, because these are digital banks that have achieved profit, it's because they have the purpose or wanting to solve a problem statement of financial inclusion, of predatory interest, or even maybe solving the non-transparency of pricing and also CX, right? Now, these are Islamic concepts, right? So these are Islamic concepts, Sharia concepts, and the institutions that are driving this are non-Islamic institutions. Yeah. I do think that the institutions in Malaysia have to level up. Maybe we are on stealth mode. So yeah, we need to speak out and do case studies a lot more.
From my point of view, I mean, I completely, totally agree with what Kelvin said with regards to when you talk about Islamic technology, Islamic banks technology, it's just about making sure that, you have the user journey. So make sure that the contracts are in place, that you can, you can move from one to another. But, that's no different from any technology, whether it's conventional or not. Now, with regards to Islamic finance, to me, the criticism that Malaysia, yes, we are a leader, but the criticism compared to the GCC towards Malaysia Islamic finance is that we're very much copycat conventional products, and it's very credit-centric. So if you go back to Islamic finance during the profit days, Maqasid al-Sharia, it's a lot more on wealth creation. But as you can see, because, there's money to be made when it comes to, providing credit. So banks are going out to the market and, providing credit products. But I think there's a lot more that Islamic finance can do to help with wealth creation, and i.e. introducing more products, away from tawarruk concept. Looking about things. But again, it is not so easy as easier said than done, because number one is acceptance. Public may not understand the risks and rewards compared to the conventional credit, auto financing, personal financing. It's very easy, right? But when it comes to investments, people are still a little bit more nervous. The real concept of profit sharing, and I think this is something that we can, the credit side of things is very, very established. We should start looking at the wealth creation part.
So are you guys doing some development around that space, since you are doing a lot of thinking in this area?
Because that's again it's something that you want to uplift the especially the B40, because they just don't have the right tools, or maybe a lot of the banks don't really think that they need they have any money to invest, or the need to invest. And especially now that you see the level of preparedness for people for retirement, it's really worrying. And I think this is something that something that you can really put our minds into, to make sure that that they start thinking about really protection, takaful, how to be prepared for rainy days, and so that they don't rely for their kids to help them when they retire. That's the same concept, and move away from just giving them with all sorts of credits, and so that they are better prepared in their later life.
And I think wealth creation is an important point as well, right? Because beyond the banks, I think the fintechs are also very much focused on introducing Sharia-compliant investments as well, even the conventional players. And I also like the point that Farilla brought up about how we have all these household names in digital banks, right? But they're all conventional banks. And it didn't occur to me. Actually, there isn't really one name that just immediately pops to mind. So I think there is a real opportunity for it to be one of us, right? So who knows? Taruni, any thoughts?
When I look at what both these great ladies have said, wealth creation seems to be the forefront of what we're trying to build out. So when I look at wealth creation, I think cost to serve is a big part of, as a bank, are you really able to deliver products at a meaningful cost, so that the ability to serve your customers is as low as possible. So we're very, very proud at AWS. And I'll tell you a little bit of a personal story. When I joined AWS 6 years ago, I was a regular salesperson. And in the first month, my manager asked me, these are your 5 clients. Please have a conversation with them to reduce their AWS bill. I'm like, really? It didn't add up, because as salespeople, the assumption is you go in, you have a quota, you've got to close a deal, there's a number you have to meet. And here we were very, very proactively talking to customers to look at, what do we do to make sure your consumption of AWS is as minimal, as efficient to the usage? And I think when you look at Sharia compliant banking, when you look at that social good, social finance, the compatibility of running on a technology that is also looking at, you've just launched, maybe in your first year you have 100,000 customers, in your 5th year you may hit 1 million, but do not build for the million, build for the 100,000. And I think that's where the synergies with digital banking, the synergies with the Islamic banking philosophies are quite strong.
So I think Kelvin is being put in a difficult position, because he's always the last to answer. And I say, what else can I say, right? So the next question, I'll start with you first.
Sorry.
But any thoughts to whether Malaysia is doing enough, or maybe a follow-up question on one of your statements is that you mentioned that inevitably you find yourself working with a lot of Islamic banks instead of conventional banks in Malaysia. Why do you think that is? And do you think we're doing enough?
So I would say I'm not an expert in specifically Malaysia Islamic finance and whether or not the banks are doing enough. What I do know is this. It's public. Maybank Islamic is a client. Maybank Islamic is engaging us to basically provide optionality. We are going to enable them to pursue multiple different business models as well as user experiences. And so my instinctive reaction is that there is a leading Islamic bank that is thinking very much about how to make it far more progressive. Not just in Malaysia, but across their network, I'm pretty sure. So yes, that's one. I think to that point, the observation here is that Islamic banks around the world are starting to put their foot down and trying to get on the forefront of innovation, which is why inadvertently I suddenly have a whole bunch of Islamic banks that we talked to over the last 18 months, 1, 2, 3 of whom we are actively engaged in a commercial relationship, and another maybe 5 or 6 across the GCC that are currently in our late stage pipeline.
Maybe we can just take a quick poll of the Islamic banks that's actually in the room, right? Can we just see a show of hands that how many of you feel that there is more focus on digital initiatives in these past 5 years versus the previous 5 years? Can we see a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I think it's pretty conclusive. All right. I guess the next angle to look at it is from the side of policy, right? And I promised to start with you first, so we'll start with you first. I think a lot of Malaysia's policy focus is very centered around driving Islamic finance, from the way we design our digital banking framework to the blueprints from both ASEAN and Bank Negara Malaysia. Do you have any thoughts on what else the regulators and the policymakers can do to further this agenda?
I think there can be a lot of cross-border collaboration that can be encouraged. Specifically, if you look at the UK, there's a significant amount of innovative, not so much the conventional banks, but innovative Islamic finance fintechs in the UK and their business models and how they actually promote the Sharia principles while at the same time creating a massively profitable 80-90% profit margin kind of product. So I think that creating a corridor and creating policies that encourage the adoption of or the engagement of those fintechs into Malaysia would be extremely helpful in my mind.
And it makes sense, right? Even the partner that you work with, Maybank, is both in Malaysia and Indonesia as well. So there's already some basis for that as well. And Rafiza, your thoughts?
Well, prior to KAF, I was with Cradle, right?
Yeah.
So
you've got both hats to be able to comment on this.
And I was involved, at MOSTI level and MDEC. There has actually been a lot of, incentives and push to give birth to Islamic fintechs, actually. But the only issue is that a lot of these fintechs, I mean, if you look at, Securities Commission have got a FICRA accelerator and INCF, built a co-working space for Islamic fintech. There's actually been quite a lot in the background that have been done to actually produce Islamic fintech, because I think, the government, MOF, really wants Malaysia to become the Islamic fintech global, at a global level. But I think the difficult part is, as you know, and it's not just Islamic fintech, any fintech Malaysians, it's just not so easy to scale beyond Malaysia. Getting funding, it's just been tough. And I think that's the difficulty that we have. Government has been, they've been really trying their best, but a lot of the fintechs, in order for them to survive, they have to move to Singapore. So, that's also another thing that, the dilemma. Government's putting all this funding and then, they all move to Singapore. So until we can, address that, especially if Malaysian Islamic fintechs that can go overseas, I think that will be wonderful. If we can have that, that would be great.
So I guess a follow-up question from me is that, of course, the policies has improved, right? There's been changes. There's the fund of funds. You're seeing more institutional money like Khazanah investing into funding societies, into Policy Street. I think 5 years ago, if you asked me that, I'm like, I don't think that would happen, right? But there is some development. But is it effective enough to slow the stem of like Malaysian companies re-establishing back in Singapore, you think?
If you talk to all the founders, it's always the valuation, and that's always been the case. You go to Singapore. By the time you land at Subang, you get the term sheet. I mean, that's what I've been told, Whereas in Malaysia, 3 pitches, 1 month later, and then, another committee, and, and then they say no, or they give you a really bad valuation. So
So there's still work to be done in terms of the speed of things, I think.
Yeah. So, I think a lot actually.
It's good to know what we need to work towards, right? And Farilla, your thoughts on policies?
Okay, so I don't have an answer, but I'm hoping this will trigger some reflection. Okay, so following from what you said, Rafiza, in that policymakers are doing a lot. We have one of the most robust and developed capital markets, right? We have Sharia regulation, regulatory framework that is, top notch. We have KLSE that's robust also with, over 700 Sharia counters. And from what you said just now, Kelvin, in that the UK has produced Islamic fintechs. More than maybe what Malaysia has produced, right? So if you look at the innovator's dilemma, innovation would come out of hardship. So that will catalyze it. So are we being so comfortable? The fact that we have such a conducive regulatory environment. So that's, I think, a reflection. So, but I agree in that the next step, at least on paper, I think bodes well in that competition is created. Open banking is coming. Nexus cross-border is also something that the central banks around the world are rallying around. Yeah, so I think ingredients are there. Institutions have to be, capital, sorry. So when you said about talking about the challenge of founders to go beyond Malaysia, so I think the market, these companies require that market that is beyond Malaysia. So I think that would be something that the regulators should be looking at.
I mean, it did give me something to think about, right? Whether they have it a little bit too good or not, right? Okay, so I guess my next question is, I wanted to hear your thoughts on what you think are some of the most, I guess, innovative solutions or cool stuff that's happening in this space, And one rule is that you have to give one example that's not your own. You can share your own one, but we also want to hear what else you think is cool that's happening around the market,
I'll take you outside the country.
I love to travel, so yeah, go for it.
This is not an Islamic bank, but I think a lot of the goodwill that they are based on
can be applied too, I'm sure.
So Nubank, I'm an absolute fan of theirs. Like Amazon, they talk about fanatic love for their clients, about a decade-long journey for them, 100 million clients, profitable, and started with really solving the customer need that Farilla was talking about, which is the population did not have access to finance because you had a credit scoring problem. So launching a credit card first and using those transaction data, which would then give you better credit scores. Open banking comes into the country, PIX comes into the country. All of this builds the ability to serve the population. They have a credit card that's in Braille. So they've really challenged what is the unbanked.
Yeah.
But in the recent year, what we've seen is they've changed or they've added on a mission statement of, is wealth management a privilege of the wealthy? So if you have an RM because you have a certain amount of wealth with a bank, Nubank looks at using technology, using AI, using a chatbot which can have a very personalized kind of conversation with their customers to tell, especially the younger generation or the unbanked, coming into banking for the first time, how to manage their money better. And that to me is wealth.
I think it ties back to what Rafiza was saying earlier as well, right? And I think you made a good point about solving the problems locally. And I think in Malaysia, we do have a retirement problem. So I think some of these things are quite crucial to the market. Kelvin, any examples? Is it easier to be the last for this, or is it harder to be the last for this?
I was about to say, I'm quite happy to be the last one for this one.
Got time to think about it, right?
Exactly. So the first one is, I actually find it pushing the boundaries of some real business model change, right? And this is a public example, so most people know about this. JP Morgan has started monetizing their data by selling to advertisers, right? And I think that is step one of a multitude of steps to create the ability for a bank to be the custodian of the data nervous center of the entire economy. Now, if you get your distribution right, you get your data ingestion right, you get your AI tools in terms of analytics right, and then you get your back end right, you will be able to not just create financial inclusion on the front end where everybody has access to tools and wealth creation. You have the ability to create fat, non-RWA accretive fee income by monetizing the data backwards to advertisers, to FMCG companies, to a whole bunch of recipients of data, of transactional data that pretty much no one in the world has access to. Today, you pay Google so much money for advertisers when they don't actually have detailed transactional data, right? Imagine what a bank can do with the right infrastructure. So that's example number one, something that's pretty much out there. Step one, I think the first bank to reach it is likely to be something like a JP Morgan to start with. And second one is an internal innovation, which I think is quite exciting for me personally, is that we've created these little bots in our platform, whereby two innovations. One is the bots, where everything at all times, all day, 24/7, the bots are running through every single user journey on the platform, so that if anything breaks, our clients will know way ahead of any of their actual clients touching that part of the user journey, which means that fixes can be done in advance, everything can be closed out quickly. Customers of our clients, which are banks, will never find out that something has broken. So that's one. The other one, which really gets me excited, is we are building this data infra on the back end, like running a product engine real time, where we are clocking less than 30 milliseconds response times and up to like 10-20 million concurrent users without any breakage whatsoever. That's very, very cool from the tech guy.
I mean, this is what's enabling the cool stuff, right? So the devil's in the detail, as they say, right? I guess my other question, to shift gear a little bit, is to think about the opportunities beyond Malaysia. And the reason why I ask this is that recently there was a news about the Philippines opening up their digital banking license to 10 players, right? And during the roadshow of Bangko Sentral Ang Filipinas in Malaysia, two Malaysian banks actually said, like, we want to build the first digital Islamic bank in Philippines. And that got me thinking about what kind of opportunities there are in the region. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. Maybe we'll start with Farilla again and give Kelvin the difficult job of being last again. Farilla?
I mean, actually, to tell you the truth, I'm not in a position to also comment on where we will go, right? Or general, okay. So I think if we look at the archetypes of digital banks, there's the one archetype that's like a new bank, where they've proven success. They've proven they are able to really lower the cost to serve, acquire customers, and they spread this love, this benefit, this business to other countries, right? At scale. That's the first archetype. Probably similar to time as well, looking at where they have gone after South Africa. The second archetype is the Starling side, the engine, and I don't know whether it's Standard Chartered is already like everywhere. Engine where they venture into other markets not via the balance sheet way, but via the platform way. So that's why I say that this is really exciting times for an Islamic bank. Yeah.
About 2 years ago, I was invited to be on a panel at a conference in Manila. And, the organizer was like really persistent. Oh, we want you to speak. I was like, why? Like an Islamic digital bank to speak in Manila. And then finally she whispered, the MOF requested for, or the central bank requested for it. And I actually had lunch. When we had lunch, so I sat next to it. And I shared with them what Bank Negara did and why Bank Negara specifically came up with the regulatory framework and the journey that we're doing. So I'm not so sure whether that's got anything to do with it, but it's interesting because they've got a huge Malaysian population, and unlike Malaysia, where we have a lot of conventional banks that also offer Islamic products, they don't have at all. Yeah, they don't have at all. And so you have a lot of Muslims with cash, but because they don't want to get riba, so they keep it in their house. Yeah, up to the extent. And these are people out in the outskirts, and it's actually quite, it poses a big social problem. And then again, they were not able to get financing, like, even as simple as buy a car. So actually when I was there, then when I came back to Malaysia, I just then realized that we're actually very, very privileged, because even before, we have Bank Islam, we have Bank Muamalat, even before this too, all the conventional banks also offer Islamic products. I mean, so we take it for granted, but in Philippines they don't. And the conventional banks don't intend to go into this space. And so I'm very happy when they made that announcement. So and CMB, their digital bank, they did very well. In fact, they POC'd their digital bank in Manila, and it's one of the more successful stories. So I think there's a lot of potential. And again, I got invited to speak in Brunei. Again, the central bank also wanted to learn the story behind why central bank came out with this policy guidelines. Now, with regards to whether KAF is going beyond Malaysia at the moment, we don't have that on our our focus is very much in Malaysia, because again, under the regulatory framework, we need to make sure that we graduate. Our focus is we want to become, a full-fledged bank to graduate and make profit. So that's our priority, because as you know, going into a different country, it's not so easy. It's very easy. You have to go through regulatory hurdles. You need to deal with local partners. Now whether or not you can trust. So. Again, if the opportunity is out there, we do have partners coming to us to explore, but at the moment we said we're not ready yet. We just want to make sure that we do best in the country that we know the best, before we start venturing outside Malaysia.
I think it's such an interesting perspective, and you rightly pointed out, I think we do take for granted, because what you mentioned over there didn't even occur to me was the reason why the regulators were looking into it. And I guess part of the reason why I'm asking is also to suss out if anyone's going for it.
I'm so busy, getting my alpha.
For sure. And we're definitely looking forward to that. And Teruni, what do you think about the opportunities in this region?
So Vincent, I'm biased. I have 3 countries that I cover, and Malaysia is where I am all the time. But I think what Malaysia presents is this amazing diversity. Like I said, you've got heritage banks, you've got the challenger banks, you've got a regulator that is really pushing the envelope when it comes to putting in frameworks, putting in guidance, allowing this to really go through that innovation journey in a controlled manner. And yes, Malaysia has become almost like the knowledge beacon. If you go into the Philippines, if you go into Indonesia, we're seeing a lot of either Malaysian leadership, such as yourself, or banks becoming coaches and mentors of what's the best way to go the Islamic finance route. So I kind of see opportunity in the sense that it's a country that's got easy access, it's got phenomenal leadership, and that is what's getting tapped onto, with regulators now shaking hands and saying, hey, this is a country that we can learn from.
I think us being the ASEAN chair this year certainly helps with pushing this forward as well. I think the other dimension to that, and we were just tracking this story as well, right? In Hong Kong, they're also fast-tracking for Islamic finance professionals to enter the market as well. And I think one of the kind of narrative that was cited by the government is they're a bit concerned about US right now. and there is a certain desire to shift away purely relying on the Western capital markets. I think, there's some interesting perspective over there. And of course, Kelvin, you guys are, operating in Malaysia, operating in Indonesia. What are your thoughts on the opportunities for this space? And are there, I suppose, other countries that you think are prime for similar opportunities in this part of the world?
I'll put on my ex-banker hat on this one.
Do it.
No, I'm very bullish on Indonesia. Right, it is the world's most populous Muslim country, of which there are some 270 million people, more than half of which are unbanked or underbanked, which gives you an untouched population of 130 million.
Which is larger than the entirety of Malaysia.
It's huge. It's huge. Yeah. So the opportunity there is inclusion. It's in Sharia compliant product distribution. It's in mass market, low margin lending kind of conversation. But it is so big that if you find a way to crack Indonesia, you've basically got a mammoth out there. Then the opportunity goes elsewhere. It's different shape elsewhere, right? You've got then the Bahrains and the Jordans of the world, where while relatively mature, are also very high net worth, relatively speaking. So there is a whole bunch of wealth creation opportunities in those markets that I would argue has not been fully tapped from an Islamic banking standpoint. So I would, in Southeast Asia, I think if you can crack Malaysia, Indonesia, you're home. That's what, 99% of the Muslim population in Southeast Asia, effectively. And then in the Middle East is just, the Saudis and the Bahrains and the Jordans of the world with a very different profile.
So I guess now I'm conscious of time as well. I think we are running short of time. Before maybe we wrap up this session, I was thinking maybe we could open up the conversation to the floor. So if anyone have any questions, just raise your arm and I'll run to you and pass you the mic.
Okay, so we've talked about Indonesia, we've talked about Philippines, but I'm curious about our neighbor Singapore. So obviously I've seen the strategy houses of the likes of CIMB, Maybank, and all these big banks, right? There's a want to tap into the Singaporean market, especially in Islamic finance. So with the rise of digital Islamic banking, is there a chance that we could possibly tap into the Singaporean market more than we already have now, right? Also, having the non-Muslims being banked as well, making our products desirable enough for them to want to consider putting Islamic first versus conventional first. So that's my question.
This is from my personal experience. So I was once head of Islamic Finance Asia for Thomson Reuters. So I look at the Islamic finance market across Asia. I spend half of my time actually sit at the Thomson Reuters Singapore office, really trying to push Islamic finance. It's not easy. Even because you see, the thing is, yes, they do have a big population Muslim, but the population Muslims there, they keep their money in Swiss accounts, the rich ones, or the family wealth office. So they don't really need an Islamic bank in Singapore. And the Muslims there are a little bit agnostic with respect to their financial requirements. It's just the way how it is. Unlike Malaysia, Malaysia, we're very very strict about it. They are less strict. It's just it's not going to be easy, in Singapore, unfortunately. And they again. Some of the Muslim Singaporeans that I know there, and we also have Maybank over there. So but to actually penetrate and that's why you don't see any Middle East banks apart from the family offices are actually in Singapore. So that's just based on my personal experience when I was at Thomson Reuters. I don't think it's any different from now. Yeah.
In terms of Malaysia, right? In terms of banking as a service, embedded finance, and open banking, where are we right now, and how should incumbent banks prepare ourselves to venture into those space?
My understanding is that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the open banking, so banking as a service, embedded finance, and open banking are three very different concepts. Let's start with that. Right, so just to clarify, open banking is a regulatory framework with hopefully the right technical framework that allows for the exchange of data for various use cases. Right, so your right to own your data. When you go to an e-commerce platform and you buy something, and they say, hey, I would like to tap your banking app to make the transaction, you have the right to say yes, and then that's open banking. Banking as a service is where banks provide the ability for non-banks to turn themselves into pseudo financial services providers through various methods. There are many ways of executing that, so that's that. And the third one is embedded finance, is a description of an experience. So embedded finance is where you make transactions without even feeling like you've made transactions. I'm simplifying. So the best and the simplest example of this is when you take Grab and you get off the car without having to do anything because your credit card has already been pre-approved. So if you take those three concepts separately and distinctly, it's quite alive and well in Malaysia. From an open banking standpoint, as I understand it, and I'm happy to be corrected here because I'm not the most familiar with this, but there is a draft framework that's been up, but nothing has actually been implemented in terms of the regulatory requirements and data, not sovereignty, but data security requirements of an open banking framework. I think that's where Malaysia is at. From a banking as a service standpoint, there have been some announcements of individuals. Some announcements of banking as a service executions, but nothing at scale in Malaysia at this point. And same for embedded finance in my mind. Now, from that perspective, I think Malaysia hasn't done a lot. I think the best executor of embedded finance, so to speak, in Malaysia is not a bank. Or bank is actually, in my opinion, again, it could be biased, it's touch and go. Yeah. So I think they're basically in everyone's phone, right? Everyone uses them, and now they've started to put embedding different products in their processes. So it's very interesting. Malaysia, in the global scheme of things, in terms of executing these business model, I would argue very openly that Malaysia is a laggard in this discussion, right? And what do you need to prepare for this? Now, I think that's the meat. I'm biased, obviously, because of the way I've done things. And my view is, if banks want to prepare for it, really prepare for it and get it up and running, banks need to significantly invest in their technical architecture and infrastructure. The ability, because the moment you go into any one of these business models, you are no longer looking at 9 to 5, 10,000 customers a day coming to your branches, making 5 transactions. You are looking at Malaysia's population is what? 30? Yeah. 30, 45 million. So you are really looking at minimally 1 to 3 million concurrent users at any one time. And my argument, other than obviously the digital banks, clearly, but most of the incumbent banks' infrastructure probably will not be able to support that scale.
Okay.
I have debates with CTOs of incumbent banks. They are obviously not very happy about it because, I don't want, my customer, putting a account in another bank, being able to see, what they have on my, they don't want to. But I said, but look at the opportunity. I said, what's the difference? I give them an example, okay? I get my salary from one big bank, okay? But because I want to have a collective view of what I have, I transfer everything and I put in another bank, all right? But if you have open banking, I don't have to do that because, on one dashboard, I can see what I have in all banks. So, and then he just kept quiet, It's like, so you keep on thinking that, you're afraid that, your customer, but I said, it's not going to stop them from taking out all their money. I mean, I'm one of them, And I said, and that's number one. And I keep on reminding, I said, the data is not yours for you to, be territorial about it. It belongs to the customer, and you need to respect the customer to decide on what they want to see. So I think that's one of the things. But PayNet is doing something about it, and having the bank backup of Bank Negara. With the introduction of digital ID, I think that will speed it up. So yeah.
Like the point you brought up is one of my biggest pet peeves when speaking to banks. It's like, oh yeah, it's territorial, it's our data, but at the end of the day, it's technically not yours. You're just a custodian of the data, right? And I hope this is a direction that we could move more quickly towards, because I remember this conversation was happening since the introduction of PSD2, and they're like, oh, this is cool, we should look into it. Now it's already like PSD3, and we're still having the same conversations, right? So I hope this is something that will evolve. So yeah, I think, it's so interesting because there's like a wealth of experience in this panel coming from different perspectives, different geographies, and different viewpoints. So to wrap up the session, maybe you can give us your thoughts on where you see the evolution of this space going in the medium to the long term, or just maybe any general thoughts that you think you want to share that you didn't get the opportunity to talk about during this duration of this panel. And then maybe we'll start with Kelvin this time and then we'll go all the way here. Kelvin?
My personal opinion is that digital Islamic banks and finance in general will face the same pressures that the conventional banks do, which is fundamentally a pressure on return on equity. And, most banks, regardless of the status, trade 4 times book, 5-6 times book. And if you were an investor, you would not put money in banks. Let's put it that way. And in order to change that, the only way is to significantly increase the return on assets, larger fee income, different business models, cost to serve, cost to acquire, becoming a fraction of what it used to be. And which is, I think, where all banks, digital Islamic or otherwise, will go and are starting to go, given the conversations I'm having everywhere around the world. Everyone wants optionality. Everyone wants the ability to have a singing, dancing platform that allows you to flip and switch business models as and when, right? Expose APIs and to be embedded in somebody else's ecosystem, create your own super app, do a back-end integration on data so that you can monetize your data in multiple places. My view is the evolution of this will very much mirror the conventional banking side of the equation with digital Islamic finance, because they have been a little behind, making more of a leapfrog. But I think over the next 10-15 years, you will see banking, retail banking specifically, SME and retail banking disappear. Disappear meaning being invisible, not that they are gone.
Rafiza, your thoughts?
To me, what I want to see is that I want to change the branding of Islamic finance away from the religion concept of it. Because if you really, really understand, it's not just about religion. Islamic finance is about equitable, justice, transparency. I mean, those are the main principles of Islamic finance, which, from what I see, the evolution of it, because of the introduction of Islamic finance, it has sort of translated into conventional. So for me, I want those principles to be also in the mainstream banking, and that it's because you see, in banking has always been one-sided. It's the choice is always at the bank, and the customers tends to be the victim, but and Islamic finance is trying to move that away. So for me, it's like, so that one day that, it becomes mainstream and, you don't talk about Islamic or conventional. So these principles are deeply embedded, in the financial system. Yeah.
I think it's a fascinating point, right? And one thing that I guess I kind of noticed is that in the two digital Islamic bank, the word Islamic is not in the bank name compared to a lot of banks. I don't know if that's intentional by design to appeal to a wider set of audience, and even BU is BU, right? There's no branding over that. But I guess my question is, you so correctly pointed out that a lot of the principles are something that non-Muslims can resonate with as well. But I suppose the concepts, the terminologies.
Yeah, I blame that to the Sharia committee actually.
Yeah. So
they put so many Arabic terminology. It's sort of even scared off the Muslims, So, I was doing this Islamic finance. I was like, oh my God, it's they make it sound so exclusive, But at the end of the day, when you really go down the real concept of it, it's just equitable, justice, transparency, I
mean, like, no common person will go, equitable, ew, I don't want that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a concept that's quite universal.
And you see the same principles that's actually applied in Japanese banks, so it's prudent risk management. So again, even when I was, back in the Thomson Reuters, I try to not use the word Islamic finance, especially because, it's a global company, right? We tend to call it, it used to be ethical financing, or Sharia finance rather than, Islamic bank, because, we should really move away from, that for us, I think it's okay. But, if you go last time, I used to speak to China and Hong Kong, and it's you're trying to. It's at the end of the day, it's just risk management, prudent principles, and so to me, I think hopefully one day that people don't, is it only for Muslims? It's no, it's just the basic principles, and these are positive. Principles that, we want to embed in the financial system as a whole.
Finance is tough enough as it is, right?
Actually, I'll groom that a little bit, right? In that the higher purpose, the objectives of it, which is the protection of life, protection of faith, protection of wealth, protection of intellect. So that is the higher purpose, right? And what's unique about Islamic banking is there is also a prohibition list, but that prohibition list is actually quite short, which is not to partake in riba or usri or interest-based interest-based transactions. And maybe I'll just give a little bit of a flavor here. Why? It's because the Islamic concept, Sharia concept, is that money is basically just a medium of transaction, right? And so it's not fertile. So you can't make money out of money. So that is the entire concept of riba or usri. The second prohibition is do not do or invest in any gambling. And the third one is uncertainty. Do not partake in any transaction that has excessive uncertainty. And so that's where contracting comes in. When you create a transaction with a customer or with a counterparty, make very clear the contract, right? So these are actually very universal concepts. So essentially that. is what Islamic banking is all about. A short prohibition list and a wide things that we can do if we anchor it to that higher purpose.
I guess like maybe just one last question before we close the session, right? And I think it's so interesting, this direction of this conversation is that I think that you'll find that there's a segment of population who would find this product appealing but very intimidated by the terms because it's something they do not understand. And even for me who observe the industry, I struggle to remember the terminology. Sometimes I have to search it back, right? Do you think there is logic or reason to go the direction of having marketing that's simplified for non-Muslims to relate to what the product is?
Yes, 120%, yes. Maybe because how this was rooted is from the scholars. And I think this is a journey not just unique to Islamic banking, right? So a lot of the terms and conditions of a conventional bank can also be very, very non-transparent, right? And yes, make it easy, make it customer-centric. Understandable.
With that, thank you all for sharing your thoughts with us, and thank you all for joining us today.